Hello and welcome to this section on adverbs. So generally speaking, adverbs modify verbs in the same way in which adjectives modify nouns. But adverbs don't just modify verbs, they also modify adjectives and other adverbs. So in other words, they add information about what is happening. So this section starts off with looking at a common way of making adverbs, which is to derive them from their corresponding adjective. We then carry on looking at adverbs in terms of relative, comparative and superlative adverbs, and then we look at adverbs which are used to ask questions, also called interrogative adverbs. And the rest of the section is devoted to different types of adverbs and how we use them. So specifically, what we've done is we've broken down the adverbs into different sort of functional groups and had one lesson on each group. So the groups we have are to do with adverbs of certainty, degree, manner, place, time, frequency, viewpoint, and opinion. And in each of these individual lessons, you'll see some commonly used adverbs of that type that we use in English. We explain when they're used and how to use them, and also give plenty of examples so you can really see what we mean. Now, just one word of warning, please don't get to the end of the section and say, yay, and all about adverbs, and charge off and start using adverbs all over the place. There is a certain style that says overuse of adverbs is a bad thing. And the reason for this is that often if you find you're overusing adverbs, it usually means you can find a better verb. So I'll give you a very quick example, as this is only the introductory part of this section. If you were to say, for example, he ran quickly, then ran is the verb and quickly is the adverb. But you could equally, instead of saying ran quickly, you could use a better verb, namely he sprinted. And in this way, you've conveyed the same information, but you haven't just used verbs over and over just with different adverbs. You've used better verbs. So just a word of warning, don't overuse adverbs, even though you now know all about them. This lesson looks at how to form adverbs from their corresponding adjectives. The usual standard rule is to take an adjective and add the letters ly to make its corresponding adverb. As this is English, it won't surprise you to hear there are exceptions to this. So here's a few examples of the add ly rule. He is a quick swimmer. He swims quickly. She paints beautiful pictures. She paints beautifully. The efficient secretary organised the event. The secretary organised the event efficiently. Now, there are some variations and exceptions which we'll look at now. So adjectives that end in ll, we only add a y, because adding ly would give 3 L's in a row, and we don't do that. So Sarah is shrill when she sings. Sarah sings shrilly. And adjectives that end in le depend on the letter before the le. So if the letter before the le is a consonant, we replace the le with ly to form the adverb. So the medic lifted the injured driver in a gentle way. He lifted the injured driver gently. If the letter before the le is a vowel, a-e-i-o-u, this actually follows the standard add ly rule. The agile girl jumped over the wall. She jumped agilely over the wall. And the exception to this is whole the adjective whole becomes the adverb wholly, as we can see written here. And adjectives that end in Y also depend on the letter before the Y. So if the letter before the Y is a consonant, we replace the Y with ILY when we form the adverb. So the problem was easy to solve. She solved the problem easily. And there's two exceptions to this, namely shy and sly, which have adverbs shyly and slyly respectively. And if the letter before the Y is a vowel, this actually as well follows the standard add-ly rule. The coy woman answered the question. She answered coyly. And the exception to this is gay, which has the adverb gaily, as we can see written here. Adjectives that end in IC we form into an adverb by adding ALLY. They are enthusiastic musicians. They play enthusiastically. And for adjectives that end in UE, we replace the UE with ULY to form the adverb. The witness spoke true words. The witness answered truly. So this is a slighter variation of the add-ly in that we remove the E first. And there are some adverbs that don't end in ly at all. So we have fast, hard, little, much and straight are examples where the adjective and the adverb are the same. And the adjective good has the adverb well. So if we're looking for an example, you could say John is good at football, but John plays football well. This lesson is on relative adverbs. So relative adverbs introduce relative clauses. And the relative adverbs are where, when, and why. And they're used to join two smaller but related sentences. And if you have formal text in which you get a preposition plus which, you can replace this with a relative adverb to make the text a bit more informal. And the rules for restrictive and non-restrictive relative clauses still apply here. Very important. So we use relative adverbs to join two smaller but related sentences. So here's two small but related sentences. This is a swimming pool. I used to swim in the pool. That sounds a bit simplistic, so we join the two by saying, this is the pool where I used to swim. Or I got home from work. I did the dishes. Again, sounds a bit simplistic, we can do better. I did the dishes when I got home from work. Steve called me. I don't know the reason. I don't know the reason why Steve called me. And we would usually omit the reason, this is why it's in brackets, and just say I don't know why Steve called me. If we have formal text, which uses prepositions plus which, we can replace that with a relative adverb to make the text appear less stiff and stuffy. So that's the pub in which we first met. Sounds a little bit stiff, doesn't it? So we say that's the pub where we first met. Or there was a bitterly cold winter the year in which he was born. Better sounding is there was a bitterly cold winter the year when he was born. Or I will tell you the reason for which Greg is sad. Again, it sounds very old-fashioned and stiff. I will tell you why Greg is sad is really what people would say these days. And the rules for restrictive and non-restrictive clauses still apply here. So just as a reminder, a restrictive or defining clause adds essential information which we need to identify a noun. And if we remove this clause, the sentence either makes no sense or is missing important information. And when we do this, we need no commas. And a non-restrictive or non-defining clause adds additional information to a noun that we've already defined. And if we remove the additional clause, the sentence is fine. And when we have this type of clause, we put commas around the extra information. And we'll look at some examples of those now. So when we add essential information, the pub where we first met is a special place. And if we take out this essential information that's underlined, we get the pub is a special place. Well, what pub? Why is it special? The thing that makes it special is it's the pub where we first met. And that's important. Well, the 70s were a time when many fashion sins were committed. I don't know if you remember that time. Horrible wide trousers, massive jacket lapels, huge wide ties, bad haircuts, shoes with platform, horrible stuff. Hopefully they'll never come back. But if we remove the underlined part, which is the restrictive clause, we get the 70s were a time. What kind of time? Doesn't really tell us anything. Well, I don't know why Paul was late. If we just remove the underlined part, we get I don't know the reason. What reason? For what? Again, that it's missing the important information. And in all the cases where we've listed the complete sentence, you'll notice there's no commas anywhere to be seen. Now, if we look at non-restrictive or non-defining clauses, we'll see that they add additional information. So Munich, where I used to live, is a fascinating city. And we see the commas around the non-restrictive clause, which when we remove it, we get Munich is a fascinating city. The fact that I used to live there is just a little bit of extra information. Summer, when it is warm, is my favourite season. And when we remove the underlined part, we get summer is my favourite season, which is a perfectly legitimate sentence. It tells us what we need to know. The bit about when it is warm is just a bit of extra information. And the relative adverb why cannot be used to introduce non-restrictive relative clauses. This lesson is on comparative adverbs. So comparative adverbs compare one action with another. We have several different ways that we can form the comparative adverb, and sometimes we omit the thing that's being compared if it's clear. For short adverbs with only one or two syllables, we add er or r to the end of the word. And please note the use of than when comparing adverbs. And if the word ends in a y, we usually replace that y with an I before adding er. So Roy jumped high. Roy jumped higher than me. Peter arrived late. Peter arrived later than Sue. And please note here that late ends in an e, so we just add an r to it. We don't have to add another e and an r. John arrived early. John arrived earlier than Bob. And here the early ends in a Y. Replace the Y with an I and add ER. For adverbs with 3 or more syllables, we add more or less in front of the adverb. So Jack drives carefully. Jack drives more carefully than David. Because carefullier would be unwieldy and sound a bit strange. Or stars shine brightly at night. Stars shine less brightly when it's cloudy. And as usual in English, we have some irregularities. So Sarah plays tennis well. Sarah plays tennis better than her brother. So the comparative of well is better. Jim scored badly on the test. Jim did worse than Paul. So badly as an adverb is worse as a comparative adverb. Tony ran far today. Today, Tony ran farther or further than Peter. Now we can use both farther and further as the comparative of far. If you want to distinguish between them, you would usually use farther for a distance and further for concepts. But it's up to you. Jenny ate little in the evening. Jenny ate less than Fred. The comparative of little is less. And the comparatives of much and many is more. And we do sometimes omit the thing that's being compared if it's clear what we're talking about. The teacher speaks more slowly for beginners. Now the thing that's being compared here is fairly clear, and it's the way the teacher speaks for non-beginner students. You need to work harder, implied than you are now. Jane began to speak more quickly, implied than she was speaking before. Bill drives more carefully now, implied than he used to. So in these cases we can see that when the comparator is clear, we don't need to state it. This lesson is on superlative adverbs. The superlative adverbs compare an action to 3 or more others. We have several different ways of forming the superlative adverb. And as well as comparisons, we also use them as intensifiers. And when the context is clear, we usually omit the group, and we'll look at examples of all of these. For short adverbs with only 1 or 2 syllables, add est or st to the end. And if there's a y at the end, we replace that with an I before adding est. Roy jumped high, or Roy jumped the highest. Peter arrived late. Peter arrived the latest. And please note with late, it already ends in an E, so we don't add another est, we just add an st to the end. And John arrived early. John arrived the earliest. So this one ends in a Y. Replace it with I, add est. For adverbs with 3 or more syllables, we don't do this because it gets too unwieldy. So we add most or least before the adverb. So Jack drives carefully. Jack drives the most carefully of them all. If we'd have said carefulliest, it's unwieldy. Or stars shine brightly at night. Stars shine least brightly on a cloudy night. And of course, it's English, so there are lots of irregularities. So Sarah plays tennis well. Sarah plays tennis the best. So the superlative of well is best. Jim scored badly on the test. Jim did the worst in the class. So the superlative of badly is worst. Tony ran far today. Today, Tony ran the farthest or furthest. Now, both farthest and furthest are the superlative of far, and we often use farthest for distances and furthest for sort of concepts. I think if you use either, most people wouldn't mind. Or Jenny ate little in the evening. Jenny ate the least in the evening. So the superlative of little is least. And the superlatives of much and many are both most. And as well as comparisons, most can also be used as a sort of intensifier. And when we do this, it sort of has the same meaning as very. So the table was most tastefully arranged. Again, we didn't have a lot of tastefully arranged tables, and that one was the most tastefully arranged. No, the table was most tastefully arranged. In other words, it's very tastefully arranged. Or Josie sang most beautifully during the concert. I await your arrival most eagerly. Now you can usually tell when it's being used as an intensifier because the word the is missing. So in, say, the first example, if we had really a range of tables that were all tastefully arranged and one of them was deemed to be the best, it would say the table was the most tastefully arranged. But because the word the is missing, this tells us that it's being used as an intensifier. And when the context is clear, we usually omit the group. So all the brothers are fast runners. Tony is the fastest. Implied of the brothers. Yeah, but because we've explained the context already, we don't need to repeat it. Now, the other way in which we omit the group is when we're comparing the same thing over various different situations or times. So if we were to say, I work best by myself, I'm comparing myself to other times when other people are around. And here again, in the first example, we had Tony is the fastest of a group, but I work best by myself. So there's no the in these cases. Or athletes run fastest after they have warmed up first. And again, this is compared to pairing the same athletes to how they run when they haven't warmed up or haven't warmed up properly. Or birds sing most actively in the early morning. And we're not comparing how active they are, because if we did, it would be the most actively. We're comparing the birds and how they sing to other times of the day. This lesson is on interrogative adverbs. So interrogative adverbs are used to ask questions. And the ones we use today are why, where, when, and how. Now there are some old-fashioned ones that we really don't use today, and we'll have a quick look at those. And how is a bit more interesting because it has several different ways of being used. These interrogative adverbs usually go at the start of the sentence. So if we look at the adverbs why, where, and when, why does it always rain at the weekend? Why is my sister dating that guy? And in all these examples, the adverb has been placed in italics to make it easier to see. Where shall we go on holiday next year? Where did I put my reading glasses? When does the film start? When are your parents arriving? And in all cases, as you can see, these are all questions and so have a question mark at the end. Now, there are some old-fashioned adverbs that we don't use anymore. And these are where to, whence, and whither. Now, if you do see these in old texts, just replace where to with to what end. And replace whence with from where. And place whither with to where. Now, I don't want to spend loads of time giving examples on these, and I really only mention it in case you come across it when reading an older text. More important is to look at how we use them today. Now, how has several different uses, and it can be used to ask in what way, to what degree. We can ask about quantities, and we can ask about frequency or intensity. We'll look at some examples now. So using how to ask in what way. How can I make my own website? How does this gadget work? Or being used to ask to what degree of an attribute or an adjective. How old is your wife? How tall is your father? We can use how to ask about quantities. How many apples do you need? How much do the apples cost? Now, I've bolded many, much, and countable and uncountable to highlight, just as a brief reminder maybe, that we use how many for countable items and how much for uncountable items. And if you need a bit of revision on this, please check out the countable uncountable lecture in the noun section. And we use how to ask about intensity or frequency. So how loudly does your husband snore? How often do you go to the gym? And as we said at the start, interrogative adverbs usually go at the start of the sentence, and all the examples we've seen up to now have followed this rule. But with indirect sentences, the verb does not follow the adverb. The direct question that we've had before is, where is the treasure buried? Or if we use an indirect way, tell me where the treasure is buried. Another example of a direct question, when can we meet? And the indirect version is, let me know when we can meet. And you'll notice, again, the direct question has the question mark at the end, and the indirect version doesn't. This lesson is on adverbs of certainty. Adverbs of certainty answer the question, how sure? So they tell us how certain or sure we are about something. And they are placed after the helper or modal verbs, but before other verbs. And if we look at negative sentences with adverbs of certainty, they can seem a bit strange at first, but we'll look at examples of all of these. So they're usually placed before the verb, as in, Jane definitely went to work today. Ted clearly needs a lesson in manners. I certainly need a shower after going to the gym. And in all cases, the adverb is in italics to make it easy to see. but they're placed after helper or modal verbs and the verb to be. So I would certainly be upset if you forgot my birthday. The train will probably arrive late again. Martin is undoubtedly the smartest one here. John has certainly forgotten our appointment. If we look at negative sentences with adverbs of certainty, they can seem to look a bit odd or even break the rules, so we'll have a look at this. So if we take the following sentence, it will definitely rain tomorrow. Now we want to make that a negative. So what do? It won't definitely rain tomorrow, or it will not definitely rain tomorrow. Now first, there's two main problems with this. Firstly, people don't actually say this. And also if they did say it, it wouldn't be what we wanted to say. So the opposite of it will definitely rain tomorrow, where we're certain that it will rain, we want to indicate a certainty that it's going to be dry and not rain. So the meaning of the sentence, it will not definitely rain tomorrow, actually means it won't definitely rain, but it might. And that's not what we want to say. So we have to do something else, and we can't use this construct. The preferred and correct way would be to say, it will definitely not rain tomorrow. But what people will say, and people love their contractions, people often say, it definitely won't rain tomorrow, which seems to go a little bit against the sort of rules that we've just stated, but it is what people say, and it is what you will hear a lot. Now we've looked at a handful of adverbs of uncertainty, and there are really many more, and they can be ordered. So if we look at this table, we have some adverbs of certainty, ranging from definitely through probably, maybe, probably not, and definitely not. And by definitely, we can attach a certainty of 100% to that. And by definitely not, we can attach a certainty of 0%. And we can look at the examples, and you can sort of see, maybe you want to pause the video here and just look through the examples and make sure you're happy with them. But the question is, what sort of certainty do we attach to the adverbs between 0 and 100? Well, most people might say, well, maybe is 50-50, so maybe might be 50%. Probably, some people might say 70, some say 80, some might say 90. In other words, the whole point is it's very subjective between 0 and 100. And you really have to take from context and know the people to know kind of when they say probably or maybe, how kind of certain they mean it. This lesson is all about adverbs of degree. So adverbs of degree answer the question, to what extent? So they tell us about the intensity or extent of something. And adverbs of degree also tell us about the completeness of something. And they're usually placed before the item that is modified. And we'll see plenty of examples showing this. And please do not confuse adverbs of degree with adverbs of manner. And lastly, very is a commonly used adverb of degree that can usually be replaced with a better word. This is maybe a topic for more advanced students. Now there are many adverbs of degree, and they can be sort of ordered. So this rather large table gives you a list of 11 adverbs of degree, ranging from absolutely at the highest intensity to scarcely at the lowest intensity. And there's a list in order going from highest down to lowest, with some examples as well. So maybe you might want to pause the video and just check the examples for yourself. But here's the thing. It's very difficult to objectively attach meaning to these adverbs of degree. It's a very, very subjective area. And one person might say, but hardly is less than barely. Well, I've put here barely being less than hardly. But the order is kind of accepted by most people. So quite is less intense than largely, and largely to mostly to extremely, and so on. But it's very difficult to attach sort of a number to this. And what we see here is that all these adverbs of degree are very subjective in the way that they're used. So it's worth just bearing in mind when we look at our examples. So adverbs of degree tell us about the intensity of something. So in winter, it is extremely cold here. It's not just cold, it's like really extremely cold. It's very cold. Or the boss strongly criticized the project manager. So the poor project manager wasn't just criticized by the boss, he was strongly criticized, which kind of makes it worse for him or her. Or Jane thinks her new boyfriend is absolutely wonderful. So she thinks the world of him. Now these three examples show how something can be made more intense, but we can also use adverbs of degree to reduce the intensity. So Peter paid little attention during the meeting. The food in the canteen is quite nice. It's kind of okay. It's not amazing. It's only quite nice. It sort of reduces the positive statement a bit. And I'm not entirely convinced by your argument, which means again it's being used to sort of reduce the expression that is being said. And adverbs of degree also tell us about the completeness of something. So Anne has completely finished her report. So all done, nothing left to do. Jim has almost finished his report. So not much left. Mandy has partly finished her report. Again, we don't know how far. It could be 50%. It could be anything really between 30 and 70. Again, subjective. And Bob just started on his report yesterday, so he's really like 10%, that sort of thing. So there we see 4 different examples showing degrees of completeness. Now please don't confuse adverbs of degree with adverbs of manner. And for more information on adverbs of manner, please check out the lesson on that topic. He speaks Dutch fairly fluently. The police treated him fairly. Now both of these are adverbs, but they're used in different ways. So as we said earlier, adverbs of degree answer the question, how much? So we're talking about how much or how fluently he speaks Dutch, and it's fairly fluently. Now as you'll learn in the adverbs of manner, that answers the question, how? So how did the police treat him? They treated him fairly. And let's look at one more example quickly. I'm terribly sorry. I was terribly sorry. I really am very, very sorry. Or Paul explained the problem terribly. So in the first example, the I'm terribly sorry is showing to the degree to which he is sorry, how sorry he is. Whereas in the second one, it's an adverb of manner, where it's explaining how he explained the problem. In other words, not very well. And we come on now to a bit of an advanced topic. So beginners will often use the word very to intensify something. And you can usually replace that with a better word. And we'll have a look at some examples of that now. So Peter ran quickly to the other end of the pitch. Now if we want to say he ran very quickly to the other end of the pitch, we can actually replace it with Peter sprinted to the other end of the pitch. And this is a better word. It describes what he did more succinctly, more briefly. Or after the marathon race, John was tired. Obviously it's a marathon race, so in order to make it more intense, we say John was very tired. But there is a better word that we can use for very tired. We can say after the marathon race, John was exhausted. And one more example. I'm on a diet and I'm hungry. So if we want to intensify it, we say I'm on a diet and I'm very hungry. Which again is perfect. All these veries are perfectly legitimate. But if we want to improve our English and make better use of the words, we could say I'm on a diet and I'm famished. This lesson is all about adverbs of manner. Adverbs of manner answer the question how. So they tell us how something happened. And they can modify verbs, adjectives, or even clauses of a sentence. And they're usually formed by adding ly to adjectives. Of course, there are exceptions to this. It is, after all, English. And please do not confuse adverbs of manner with adverbs of degree. The placement of adverbs of manner can change the meaning of the sentence, and we'll look at examples for all of these now. Adverbs of manner are usually formed by adding the letters ly to the equivalent adjectives. So, example, he is a quick swimmer. Quick being the adjective describing the swimmer, or he swims quickly. She paints beautiful pictures. She paints beautifully. Or the efficient secretary organised the event. The secretary organised the event efficiently. Of course, we have exceptions to this. This is, after all, English. So here we have one with two L's at the end of the word, and if we added ly, we'd get three L's together, which we really never have. So we just add a Y to double L. So Sarah is shrill when she sings, or she sings shrilly. If we have I see at the end, we add an ALLY. I think this just makes it easier to say. So they are enthusiastic musicians, or they play enthusiastically. Now here we have a situation where we have LE following a consonant. And in this particular case, we don't add an LY, gently. We just replace the E with a Y. So the gentle medic lifted the injured driver, or he lifted the injured driver gently. Now if the LE follows a vowel, as in this case, this actually takes the standard rule, just add LY. So the agile girl jumped over the wall, she jumped agilely over the wall. An exception to this is whole becomes wholly, as we can see here. Now if we have Y following a consonant, we change the Y to ILY when we form the adverb. So the problem was easy to solve. She solved the problem easily. Now the exceptions to this are shy and sly, which form shyly and slyly respectively in the adverb form. However, if the Y follows a vowel, then that follows the standard add-ly rule. So the coy woman answered the question. She answered coyly. And the one exception to this is gay. We write gaily with an I. And if a UE, we don't add an ly, we remove the E from the adverb form. So the witness spoke true words. The witness answered truly. So UE goes to ULY as an adverb. And some adverbs, of course, don't end in ly at all. And here's a few here where the adjective and adverb are the same. So fast, hard, little, much, and straight are the same word in the adjective and adverb form. So you just have to really make sure you're clear which is which. And another exception is the adjective good becomes the adverb well. So you would say he is good at football, but he plays football well. And another thing to watch out for is with hard and hardly. They almost mean the opposite. So hard, it means something is difficult, or you're working hard on it, but you're not working hardly on it. Okay, so be very careful with that one. And please do not confuse adverbs of manner with adverbs of degree. And for more information on adverbs of degree, please check out the lesson on adverbs of degree in this block. So the police treated him fairly. He speaks Dutch fairly fluently. So an adverb of manner, answering the question how, for how the police treated him, they treated him fairly. Or we're saying he speaks Dutch fairly fluently, that's an adverb of degree, so it's explaining how well he speaks Dutch. And one more example, Paul explained the problem terribly, or I'm terribly sorry. So the first one is terribly is an adverb of manner, as it explains how Paul explained the problem, in this case not very well. Or I'm terribly sorry. The terribly here is an adverb of degree, meaning like I'm really very, very sorry. And the placement of adverbs of manner can actually change the meaning of the whole sentence, and we'll look at some examples of this. She quickly agreed to go shopping. So her agreement was quick. Now someone asked her to go shopping and very quickly she said of course. Or she agreed to go shopping quickly. The agreement wasn't necessarily fast, but the shopping was quick. Perhaps this example is a little bit clearer. He asked me quietly to leave the house. So he didn't shout, he just asked quietly, can you leave the house? But this example, he asked me to leave the house quietly. The quietly refers to how I leave the house, not how he asked me. This lesson is on adverbs of place. So adverbs of place answer the question where. So they tell us where something happened. They can refer to direction, a distance, position, or movement. They usually go towards the end of the sentence. And we need to look at adverbs of place and prepositions a little bit carefully. So adverbs of place when they refer to direction. Running uphill is exhausting. Let's drive down there tomorrow. Save yourself, run away. The ship sailed southeast. The woods are located north of the town. The crowd gazed upwards at the stars. In all these cases, the adverb is in italics to make it stand out easier. Referring to distance. My friend's house is nearby. The nearest supermarket is not far away. Glasgow and Edinburgh are about 50 miles apart. So the last example is more of a specific distance. The first two are general distances. Or when they refer to a position or a location. We always go abroad in the summer. Your glasses are here. Tom lives above a restaurant. The slow runners started falling behind. They looked around but couldn't find their dog. Look up there. What kind of bird is that? And adverbs of place can refer to movement. The dog walked forwards. Close your eyes and walk backwards. After a hard day at work, she was finally homeward bound. The train sped westwards at maximum speed. The soldiers marched onwards, eager to get out of the cold. Now we need to look at adverbs of place and prepositions a little bit closely because they often get confused. The simple explanation is that prepositions act on and require an object, which is a noun or a pronoun. Adverbs act on verbs, and adjectives and other adverbs and have no need of an object. So Jim injured his knee when he fell down. He had to use crutches and had problems going down the stairs. So in the first case, it's an adverb of place. He fell down. It says, where did he fall? And in the second case, down is a preposition. Down the stairs. And another example is, if you need some fresh air, you will need to go outside. It's describing where you need to go. Or for young children, we can say young children often colour outside the lines. In this case, outside is a preposition. Now, if we want to get really technical, you can say outside the lines is an adverbial phrase because it describes where the children colour. Outside the lines. So outside the lines is the adverbial phrase, which is comprised of a preposition and a noun. This lesson is on adverbs of time. Adverbs of time answer the question when or how long. So they tell us when something happened or how long it took. Please do not confuse adverbs of time with adverbs of frequency. Adverbs of time are usually placed at the end of the sentence, but we can place them at the start of the sentence to add emphasis to the time or duration. So we usually place them at the end of the sentence. So I will change my job next month. She left early today. He is in the office now. This gives us the when, and it can also use it to show how long. So Bob lived in Italy for 5 years. We haven't seen Peter since 2007. Or Paul's toothache kept him awake all night. Now, why have I underlined for and since in these last examples? A very common mistake is for people to get these the wrong way round. And you will often hear people say they've lived in Italy since 5 years, which is wrong. So we use for for a duration and since a specific point. So Bob lived in Italy for 5 years. We haven't seen Peter since 2007 is the correct usage of these two words. And we can put adverbs of time at the beginning of the sentence to emphasize the time or the duration. So next year, John will run for president. Now we could have put it, John will run for president next year. By putting it this way round, we've emphasized that it's next year. Or yesterday I finished my assignment. Now we could have written I finished my assignment yesterday, but by putting it this way we emphasize the fact that it was yesterday. Or 12 years we've been engaged, we really should name the day. Now again, the 12 years is the thing that's being emphasized here. We could have expressed it differently. Or in a few minutes we will have the results and it will all be over. And we could have expressed it differently, but by putting in a few minutes at the start of the sentence, kind of adds to the suspense and excitement of what the results will be. This lesson is all about adverbs of frequency. Adverbs of frequency answer the question, how often? They tell us how often or how frequently something happened. And please don't confuse adverbs of frequency with adverbs of time. So adverbs of time answer the question when, and this is how often. So please look at the adverbs of time lesson for more details on that. So the frequency can be definite, daily, weekly, yearly, etc. Or they can be indefinite, rarely, sometimes, often. And the position in a sentence varies as well. And because adverbs of frequency often describe habits, we'll see the present simple tense being used a lot in the examples. Then look at some definite adverbs of frequency. I eat breakfast every day. And as in all these examples, the adverbs are in italics to make them stand out easier. We go to the cinema once a month. They go on holiday twice a year. I drink tea 4 times a day. We go to a restaurant every other week. Anne never deviates from her daily routine. His salary is paid monthly. Now those are all definite adverbs of frequency. And these are some indefinite adverbs of frequency, but even though they're indefinite, they can still be put in some sort of order, although it's subjective. So if we look at this table, and again you might want to pause the table to read the examples, we've ordered them sort of from always, which is like 100% of the time, to never, which is 0%. And we've got usually, frequently, often, normally, sometimes. And these aren't all of them, by the way. There are a lot more adverbs of frequency than this table. This is used to illustrate a point. Now, we can assign values of 0 to never and 100 to always as a percentage. But what percentage value would you give frequently? 60? 70? It depends. What you give will be different from what somebody else gives. And here we see that the exact numbers are subjective, but most people would agree that the order is correct, even though they wouldn't give the same values to the adverbs. So as we said earlier, the position in the sentence can vary for adverbs of frequency. So it usually goes before the main verb. She normally does well in exams. I usually take the bus to work. We occasionally eat Chinese food. But with modal or helper verbs and the verb to be, the adverb is placed between these verbs and the main verb. So we are always happy to see you. Bob would never laugh at work. Bill doesn't usually drink on a weekday. Now here you can see the modal helper verb and to be, the adverb next, and then the main verb. Now some adverbs of frequency go at the beginning of the sentence. Always wash your hands before the meal. Sometimes I cycle to work. Occasionally we like to eat a really hot curry. Once a month we go to our favourite restaurant. And some adverbs of frequency go at the end of the sentence. I drink coffee every day. Judy goes on holiday twice a year. We go to our favourite restaurant once a month. And I really am sorry, but there's no hard and fast rule that explains where you put these adverbs. You just have to see it and learn it and use it and practice it. I'm sorry about that. And to make it more interesting, some adverbs of frequency are actually flexible in their positioning. Sometimes I cycle to work. I sometimes cycle to work. Or even I cycle to work sometimes. But they're not that flexible that you can say, I cycle sometimes to work. This isn't an option that we can use. So we put a big red line through it. 3 out of 4 is not bad. Again, reading will help you. Practice them. You will find it easier with use and time and practice. This lesson is on adverbs of viewpoint. So adverbs of viewpoint tell us whose point of view is being expressed. They also specify what part of something we are talking about. And these adverbs of viewpoint are usually at the start of the sentence, where they're followed by a comma. They can be single words or adverbial phrases, and we'll see examples of all of these now. So adverbs of viewpoint tell us whose point of view is being expressed. In my opinion, you should accept the job. And in all these examples, as we can see, the adverb has been put in italics to make them easier to spot. This is an adverbial phrase, in my opinion, followed by a comma, you should accept the job. Meaning here, I think that you should accept the job. According to the writer, the politician is corrupt. So the writer thinks that the politician is corrupt. The politician may or may not be corrupt. That's not the point here, but the writer thinks that he is or she is. To my boss's knowledge, I was sick that day. So my boss believes that I was sick that day. Whether I really was sick that day is not the point here. The point is that his boss thinks he was or I was. And adverbs of viewpoint can specify what part of something we're talking about as a sort of an aspect. And there are many, many, many possible adverbs here that we can use as viewpoint adverbs. Financially, it makes no sense at all. So something makes no sense from a purely financial point of view. There may be other reasons that it does make sense, but financially seen, it doesn't. Physically, there's nothing wrong with you. That might be your doctor saying this. So from a purely physical point of view, you're perfectly healthy. They might have mental or emotional problems, but not physically. And officially, we can't walk on the lawn on our own. So according to the rules, we can't walk on the lawn without a member being with us. We can still do it, but there are rules against it. Now, we've said at the start that the adverb of viewpoint usually starts the sentence, but they really can be placed anywhere. Wherever we put them, we need to separate them with commas from the rest of the sentence. And we'll look at some examples here. We'll take the "in my opinion, you should accept the offer." That's at the start. But we could, of course, put it in the middle. You should, in my opinion, accept the offer. And here we see both before and after. So the whole of the adverb is surrounded by commas. Or if we put it at the end of the sentence, you should accept the offer, comma, in my opinion. And in each of these cases, they all have the same meaning. There's no difference in meaning. It's purely a positioning thing. However, when you place the adverb in the middle of the sentence, it's important to check readability. And if necessary, move it to the start or the end of the sentence if it makes it easier to understand for the reader. This lesson is on adverbs of opinion. Adverbs of opinion are also known as evaluative adverbs. So normally, adverbs describe how or when an action occurs. Adverbs of opinion are different. They add information about the speakers of opinion of the events. Adverbs of opinion usually go at the start of the sentence, and they modify the entire following clause. And adverbs of opinion have a certain similarity to adverbs of viewpoint, although they are different. So adverbs of opinion are used to indicate a degree of certainty, and in all these examples the adverb will be in italics to make them easier to spot. Clearly, you have no idea what you're doing. So it's clear to me that you have no idea what you're doing. Apparently, you will have to do better. Means there are indications that you need to improve. Surely you can follow my argument. I am sure that my argument is easy to follow. And in all cases you see the comma after the adverb of opinion. Or they're used to indicate attitude. Amazingly, he did very well on the test. I am amazed that he did well on the test if I am the speaker. Other people, maybe they expected him to do well, but for the speaker, he is amazed. Sadly, she couldn't come to the party. So I, or the speaker, is sad that she couldn't come to the party. Surprisingly, the organic vegetables were cheaper. The organic vegetables were cheaper than the non-organic, and this surprised me, because normally they're the more expensive ones. And lastly, we use adverbs of opinion to indicate judgment. Now, unlike other types of opinion adverbs, these don't go at the start of the sentence and usually follow the subject without commas. I stupidly forgot my wallet this evening. I forgot my wallet, and I think it was stupid of me. Right? The judgment of myself is that I was stupid. You carelessly broke my favourite vase. Meaning, you broke my vase and I think you weren't being careful. Maybe they thought they were being careful, but my judgment is that they were being careless. Julie bravely stood up to the bully. I thought it was brave of Julie to stand up for herself. Hello, and welcome to this section on prepositions. So prepositions are these kind of small words that go before nouns and show the relationship between the noun and the rest of the sentence. And there are about 70 commonly used prepositions in English. And it really would be a mistake to kind of say, right, here are all the prepositions and here's how we use them all. That would be really difficult to learn. So what we've done here is we've broken them down into groups, and they've been grouped by sort of function. So we've got prepositions of time and place, direction, reason, connection, device, agency, and origin. And in each of these individual lessons, we've said, for instance, here's all the prepositions of time. And for each preposition, there's a description of when it's used and plenty of examples to illustrate the point. Now, one of the confusing things about prepositions is that many of them are used in different ways and in different sort of functions. So, for instance, the three most common prepositions of time are in, on, and at. And the three most common prepositions of place are in, on, and at. And this is a source of confusion simply because you need to be sure how it's being used and in which way it's being used. And by grouping them as we have by how they're used, I think this will be a lot clearer for you to understand when you come to learn about these. Now, the other thing that causes confusion is these very same words that are prepositions can also be used as adverbs. And it's sometimes not clear which is which. So the last lesson is on how to tell the difference between prepositions and adverbs. I hope you find the lessons informative. This lesson is all about prepositions of time. The most common prepositions of time are at, on, and in. The others that we'll look at during this lesson are for, during, since, by, until, before, after, to, and past. There are, of course, other ones that don't come up as often, and we won't be looking at those here. So we use at for specific times of the day. Let's meet at noon tomorrow. Could we meet at 1 o'clock instead? The film starts at 7 o'clock in the evening. Julie usually gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Peter usually starts work at 9 and finishes at 6. Most people put the cat out at night. And we use on for days and dates. I have an appointment on Friday. Shall we go out for a meal on your birthday? I can't make it on Saturday. Could we go on Sunday instead? New Year's Eve is on December 31st. Isaac Newton was born on Christmas Day, 1643. We use in for months, years and seasons, and strangely enough, specific times of the day. School starts in September this year. We were on holiday in March last year. There will be an election in 2020. Winston Churchill was born in 1874. Could I book an appointment in the afternoon? And that Christmas carol, in the bleak midwinter. The preposition for is used when we're referring to durations of time. My grandparents usually sleep for 15 minutes after lunch. We worked in the garden for 6 hours without taking a break. John has lived in France for 12 years. Simon has lived in the same house for over 50 years. When we use during together with a noun, we use this for when we want to say that something happened within a specific period of time. So the fire alarm went off during lunch. And here lunch is not the thing you eat, it's the time of the lunch break. Students are not allowed to eat or drink during class. It is annoying when people talk during films. Please switch off all phones during the exam. And again, in all of these, we're not talking about the films or the exams. We're talking about the time that the film is running or the time that the exam is being taken. And we use since for describing events that start or will start from a specific time. So Peter and John have known each other since they were children. James has lived in London since 2005. But Mary has lived in Rome for 12 years. So we use since from a specific time and for the duration. Common mistake. What have you been up to since we last met? I've been working here since August. Will it take much longer? I've been waiting since 10 o'clock. And here, in prepositions of time, we use by to mean not later than. So the report must be finished by Friday, or not later than Friday. No worries, I will make sure it is done by then. Paula has to be home by 6 o'clock or else there's trouble. Tim said he would be back by midnight. And we use until to describe an action or event that stops or has stopped at a specific time. The examples will make it clear. If we're talking informally, or rather writing informally, instead of using until, we can use till. The concert went on until midnight. I will wait for you until 7 o'clock. Sandy is staying with her mother until Sunday. Geese stay here until October, then they fly south for the winter. The lads stayed in the pub until it closed. And before is used for things that happen before or prior to a defined time or event. So please tidy up your desk before you leave. Dennis always goes to bed before midnight. Conrad always eats a good breakfast before going to work. Most people are nervous before exams. You must visit us before you go back. And conversely, after is similar to before, but when it's following a defined time or event. Ben always has a shower after his workout. The students celebrated after the last exam. Please keep the noise down after 10 at night. Why don't you come around after work tomorrow? After you talk to him, come and see me. So the last two are referring to telling the time, and we use to when we're talking about how long it is until the next full hour. So it is 20 minutes to 7 now, i.e. 6:40. In 5 minutes, it will be 6:45, i.e. 6:45. In 10 minutes, it will be 10 to 7, i.e. 6:50. I set the alarm for exactly 12 minutes to 8, i.e. 7:48. If the meeting starts at 10, get there no later than 5 to 10. And conversely, we use past when we're talking about how many minutes or how long has expired since the last full hour of the day. So it is 10 minutes past 8 now, or 8 to 10. In 5 minutes, it will be 8:15, at 8:15. In 10 minutes, it will be 20 past 8, or 8:20. I set the alarm for exactly 12 minutes past 8. It is 8:12. A 10 o'clock meeting should start no later than 5 past 10. This lesson is on prepositions of place. The prepositions of place refer to the location of objects, people, or places. The most common prepositions of place are at, on, and in. The others that we'll look at also in this lesson are by, near, close to, next to, beside, between, behind, in front of, over, above, below, and under. We use at for a specific location or event. I will wait for you at the cinema entrance. Paul is sitting at the bar. We met the customers at the head office. Sid's house is at the end of the street. Everyone had a great time at the party yesterday. Steve is studying maths at university. We use on for surfaces or if something is on top of something else. The mug is on the table. Don't sit on the grass if it's wet. Please leave the drinks on the tray. Jack hung a picture on the wall. Don't sit on that chair, it's just been painted. We use in when we're talking about enclosed spaces or even geographical locations. The plates are in the cupboard. There are thousands of books in the library. Most people cook in the kitchen. London is in England. We have a meeting in Toronto next week. In your opinion, what is the best band in the world? We use by, near, and close to when the distance between two things is small. And it is worth noting that close to is the only one that uses the word to. You wouldn't have by to or near to. So Peter prefers to sit by the window when flying. Jane likes to sit near the entrance of the cinema. We have Jane likes to sit near to the entrance of the cinema. You wouldn't, that the to is wrong there. We don't need that. The first version, Jane likes to sit near the entrance of the cinema, is correct. However, don't stand so close to me. And next to and beside are when two things are adjacent. And beside is slightly more formal than next to. The bus was empty. Why did he have to sit down next to me? Jenny sits beside Mary at school. My uncle is standing next to my sister in the photo. John's house is beside the restaurant. So we use between when one thing is in the middle of two other things. Put a slice of cheese between two slices of bread. Voila! You now have a cheese sandwich. Would you like to sit between Tony and Peter? Donny is an idiot. Nothing between his ears at all. His house is between the Browns and the Balls. Old joke time. Mr. and Mrs. Brown one side, Mr. and Mrs. Ball the other side, and this is how we say their house is between the Browns and the Balls. And this is the punchline of the old joke is, and when his house caught fire, he was very happy to be pulled out by the Browns. So we use behind when one thing is to the rear or the back of something else. And it's the opposite of in front of. So Paul got behind the wheel of the car and drove away. Peter is standing behind Paula in the queue. Sadie hung her coat behind the door. The car park is behind the supermarket. And then we have in front of, when we mean one thing is situated before another thing. And as we heard, it's the opposite of behind, which we've just seen. The teacher stood in front of the class. Let's not put the cupboard in front of the television. Bad idea. The man in front of Jim looks a bit like Churchill. English people are usually too polite to push in front of you. That's in a queue, of course. And we use over and above when one thing is higher than something else. And these are very similar, but we use over when one thing is in direct contact or when one thing covers another. We'll see the examples. She pulled the blanket over her head so that the blanket was touching her. Hannah held the umbrella over both of us. So in this case, the umbrella isn't actually touching us, but it does cover both of us. I like jelly with cream poured over it. Put the towel over the radiator to dry. So we said on the previous slide, we use over and above when one thing is higher than something else. And although they are very similar in use, we use above when something is higher, but not necessarily directly over something else. So we walked along the path above the lake. So the path was higher than the lake, but around it in this case. She hung the picture above her bed. Not much of Holland is above sea level. The pupil raised her hand above her head to ask a question. Now below and under are the opposites of over and above, and we use these when something is lower than something else. And we use under when one object covers another. And underneath is another word for under. So the dog is hiding under the bed. The boy put the tooth under his pillow. I found your earring under the sofa. There is a troll under the bridge. And in all these cases, the thing that is under something else is completely under it. It's covered by it. And then below is again used when something is lower than something else. But it's really just when it's in a lower position, not necessarily covered by it. And we can also use beneath as another word for below. But much of Holland is below sea level. Her flat is below mine. The ship is just below the horizon. I saw a big fish below the surface of the water. This lesson is all about prepositions of direction. Prepositions of direction tell us where something or someone moves, and it also tells us where to put something. They commonly follow verbs of motion. Common prepositions of direction are to, onto, and into, and these are related to the prepositions of place, namely at, on, and in, respectively. And other prepositions of direction include at, from, over, above, under, along, around, across, through, out of, towards, away from, off, up, and down. And we'll see examples of all of these. I would like to point out that you have to be careful with prepositions of direction and not confuse them with prepositions of place. Now, prepositions of place tell us where something is, but the prepositions of direction really have to have an element of movement in it. So we use to indicate movement towards a location or person. We need to get Bob to the hospital now. Something's wrong with Bob. Last weekend we went to London. Could you give this letter to Peter, please? The boy threw the ball to his friend. We use onto for movement that ends on top of something. And onto, preposition of direction, corresponds with on, its preposition of place. So wreckage from the ship washed up onto the shore. Bob moved the coffee table onto the carpet. The builder lowered the roof onto the house. Laura climbed onto the table to reach the lamp. And all of these cases, there's a sense of movement. And if we swapped onto with on and just stated a position, that would then be a preposition of place. So we just take the last example. Laura climbed onto the table to reach the lamp. So Laura was on the table. We use into for movement that ends up in something. And as previously with onto and on, into corresponds with the preposition of place in. The children dived into the swimming pool. The porter carried the bags into the hotel room. The junk mail was thrown unread into the paper bin. Best place for it. The mechanic lowered the engine into the car. And as previously with onto and on, we just take the example with the mechanic lowering the engine into the car. That's the movement. And when he's finished, the engine is in the car. And that then is a preposition of place. And we use at to indicate movement towards a location or person. So the boy threw the stone at the girl. Now we compare this with the previous example. The boy threw the ball to his friend, and to and at are not the same. So in the case for the boy throwing a ball to his friend, the friend was supposed to catch it, whereas the boy throwing a stone at the girl, he's trying to hit her with the stone. I'm not a nice little boy. The enemy came at me from all directions. Jim threw a dart at the board and hit the bullseye. And we use from for movement with a specific origin. It's a bit like the opposite of to. It is about 874 miles from Land's End to John O'Groats. And just to explain that, Land's End is a very southern tip of the United Kingdom, and John O'Groats in Scotland is a very northern tip of the United Kingdom, and Land's End to John O'Groats generally is the longest distance throughout the United Kingdom. My hamster escaped from its cage. Here's a birthday present from me to you. I cycled from home to work today. So we use over for movement that is higher than something and across something. The boy threw the ball over the house. So he's on one side of the house and he throws the ball up across the house, and it lands on the other side. Those birds are flying over the trees. The burglar jumped over the fence and ran away. So he's on one side of the fence, he jumps up over the fence and he's gone. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. For those who haven't seen this sentence before, this is the shortest sentence in English that has every letter of the alphabet. We use above for moving up to somewhere that is higher than something else. Please put the picture above the bed. Now this is higher than the bed, like on the wall, but it's not over the bed. If it was over the bed, it would be horizontal, and here it's above the bed, so it's higher than the bed. Put your hands above your head. Let's get your hands higher than your head. The waterfall above the lake is beautiful. The weather improved when we flew above the clouds. And we use under as like an opposite of over for movement that takes us lower than something, or that is lower than something. The puppy crawled under the fence. The cat ran under the bed to hide. We put the presents under the tree on Christmas Eve. And it's fun to swim in the lake under the waterfall. And we use the preposition along for movement along the edge of something or in a straight line. So there is a picturesque path along the river. And picturesque is just another word for beautiful, pretty. The pupil followed the teacher along the corridor. The couple went for a romantic walk along the beach at sunset. The coastal road runs along the beach. And we use around for circular movement or for movement along a curved path. We walked around the church to get more photographs. The road is blocked. We'll have to drive around the obstacle. This door is locked. We'll have to go around and use the other door. As around the house or the building. Shall we go for a walk around the park tomorrow? We'll use a cross for movement that goes from one end to another, or from one side to the opposite side. We had to walk across the bridge to get home. A silly boy ran across the road without looking. That boat will take you across the river. Sam's friend lives across the street from him. And you see in all these examples is a case of, sort of something on the opposite side of where we are. And we use through to describe movement that goes from one side of an enclosed space to the other side. We drove through the tunnel under the river. Water runs through the pipes to the house. The girls were playing and jumping through the hoops. The kitten crawled through a gap in the fence. And we use out of for movement that finishes outside of something. So the player hit the ball out of the park. The water's getting cold. You should get out of the bath now. Take the ingredients out of the packet and follow the instructions. And you'll have nice cake. We've arrived. You can all get out of the car now. And we use towards for motions or movement that bring us closer to something. We took our bread and walked towards the ducks to feed them. The defender kicked the ball towards the opposition goal. The girl laughed and ran towards her sister. When it started raining, I ran towards the bus shelter. In all these cases, we started off further away from something, and at the end of the movement, we are now closer to that thing we were talking about. And the opposite of towards is away from, which is movement that takes us further away from something. The father told the boys to stay away from his daughter. Cat ran away from the dog. The truant ran away from school, and a truant is someone who should go to school but doesn't. Get away from me. Come back when you've had a bath. Obviously, someone's a bit smelly. And we use off for movement which is down or away from something. The wind blew the hat off his head. Please take your feet off the table. We get off the bus at the next stop. Remember to take all your bags with you when you get off the train. We use up to describe movement that takes us higher than something or to the north. Running up that hill was tiring. Alan climbed up the ladder to fix the roof. Time for bed. Up the stairs you go. So those three are all examples where you end up going higher than you were before. And this last example, why don't you come up and visit us next week? The people who are asking live further to the north than the people who are visiting. So you would say, come up and visit us. Opposite of up is down, and this describes movement that takes us lower or to the south. The ball rolled down the slope. Riding down a steep hill is great fun. The dog shouldn't be on the sofa. Make it get down. And again, those three are movement that takes us lower than something. And this last one, you want to come down next weekend. This is being asked by someone who lives more to the south than the people they want to visit. This lesson is on prepositions of reason. Prepositions of reason tell us why something happened. They can also tell us why something will happen. And the common prepositions of reason are for, through, and because of. But there are many others, as we'll see. The preposition for usually joins a phrase with another noun. Everything happens for a reason. I bought you flowers for your birthday. If we use for to join a noun with a verb, then the verb will usually take its gerund form, which then means it gets treated as a noun. And many thanks for helping me yesterday. Do you have anything for getting rid of weeds in the garden? And we use through to explain how something happened. So Andy succeeded through sheer hard work and determination. So that the hard work and determination was the reason how he managed to succeed. Our sales increased through effective marketing. Again, effective marketing being how we managed to increase sales. Through her courage, the team escaped unharmed. We also use because of to show the reason for something. And this usually follows the main clause. I was late for work because of the bus strike. The moon only shines because of the sun. In other words, the sun shines on the moon, it reflects to us, it looks like the moon is shining, but it's not. Only because of the light from the sun. The football player was on the bench for a month because of his injury. On the bench here is an expression meaning that he wasn't actively playing, but sitting on the side during matches. The barbecue was cancelled because of the heavy rain. Now there are many other prepositions of reason. We won't go into lots of examples because they're generally synonymous with the ones we've already seen. And in many cases you can just swap out one of the ones we've seen with one of these other examples and the sentence will be just as good. So these others would include due to, on account of, by courtesy of, by reason of, by virtue of, in the light of, and thanks to. This lesson is on prepositions of connection. The prepositions of connection describe possession, relationships, or accompaniment. And these prepositions of connection are of, to, and with. We use of to describe relationships and possession. Are you the sister of Ian? In other words, are you Ian's sister? London is the capital city of England. When we use of for possession, we often use a possessive pronoun. So Tim is a good friend of mine. not of me, but of mine. Bill is on the same team as Peter, so Bill is a teammate of his. We also use to describe relationships and possessions. Stephen was like a brother to me. That old house used to belong to my aunt. That is Paul's bike. It belongs to him. This is Lizzie's doll. It belongs to her. As we can see, when we use to, we don't use possessive pronouns. So it's say it belongs to him, but it is a bike of his, as we saw in the previous slide. And we use with for accompaniment. Will you go to the theatre with me? What would you like with your fish? I would like chips with the fish, please. And Judy is the girl with the ponytail. This lesson is on prepositions of device. We use prepositions of device to describe technologies, machines, and of course devices. And you may also see these referred to as prepositions of instrument. And the prepositions in this lesson are by, with, and on. So we often use by when referring to transportation methods. I usually travel to work by car. Bill travelled from one end of the country to the other by train. He completed the last part by foot. Now we could have said he walked the last part, and that would have been equally as easy to understand and equally as valid. But if we look at this next example, Sally finds travelling by plane to be very stressful. Now if we'd have rephrased it as Sally finds flying to be very stressful, it's not clear whether she's the pilot or the passenger. So by phrasing it this way, we make it very clear that she's the passenger. We often use with when referring to machines and other devices. Paul cut the grass with a lawnmower. The lock can be opened with the proper key. The manager can open any door with the master key. It's easy to whip cream with a whisk. We often use on when referring to machines and other devices. I wrote the letter on the computer. Penny likes riding on her motorbike. Now, you're probably saying, hang on a minute. You said by is used for transportation devices, and you would be right. In this case, though, the riding implies some sort of bicycle or motorbike or horse or something, and we'd use then on her motorbike to be clear exactly what we're referring to. We'd say she likes travelling by motorbike, but she likes riding on her motorbike. You can call me on my mobile phone at any time. And cell is in brackets here because mobile phone is what the UK English people would say, and cell phone is the US, the American English version. John cut the wood to size on the bandsaw. This lesson deals with prepositions of agency. Prepositions of agency describe something that causes or caused in the past something to happen. And they're usually written in the passive voice, as we'll see in the examples. And the prepositions of agency are by and with. We tend to use by for people or animals. The house was designed by an architect. passive voice. The active voice version, an architect designed the house. I was bitten by my neighbour's dog. Passive. The active, my neighbour's dog bit me. The boy's room was tidied by his mother. Again, another passive voice example. The active voice version would be the boy's mother tidied his room. And we use with for things that aren't people or animals. The bread was cut with a knife. A knife cut the bread is the active version. The bucket is filled with dirty water. Dirty water fills the bucket. The gnats were repelled with insect spray. Again, all passive voice examples. The active version of this is insect spray repelled the gnats. This short lesson is on prepositions of origin. The prepositions of origin are from and of, and we use them to describe something's origin. And this can include nationality, hometown, and ethnicity. But it also includes where something was designed or built. So using from is far more common than using of. This whiskey is from Scotland. Jimmy and Morag are also from Scotland. Specifically, they're from Glasgow. Billy got a new computer from his parents. We use of for more formal situations, and we also use it when we're being a bit funny or comic or humorous. The formal way of expressing this information would be many Americans are of European descent. But you could, of course, say of the Caucasian persuasion if you wanted to make it less formal and a bit more funny. Or another example, I think the AK-47 rifle is of Russian origin. This short lesson deals with the question of whether a word is a preposition or an adverb. Now, very often we will have the same word and it can be used as a preposition or an adverb. And this can really cause confusion for learners. But there is a relatively simple way to tell the difference. So if there's an object, it's a preposition. We can also ask the question what to make it clearer. And if there's no object, then it's an adverb. So look at the first example, and if the word has an object, then it's a preposition. So small children often colour outside the lines. Outside what? The lines is the answer, and the lines is also the object of outside. Therefore, outside is being used as a preposition here. And outside the lines is an adverbial phrase describing how they colour. Colour being used as a verb here. So if there's no object, then it's an adverb. So why don't you all go and play outside? Well, the question outside what has no answer because there is no object after the word outside. Therefore, outside in this example is an adverb, specifically an adverb of place. And please feel free to check the adverb section for more information on this.